During the 1960s, reports surrounding alien abductions arose prominently across the globe. As society became more enraptured by these wild claims, it was no surprise when Hollywood started cranking out movies involving little green or grey men. Although the concept of an alien invasion is terrifying, there's something about being kidnapped by a space invader that's more frightening and personal. So let's take a look at some horror films that are based on this very scenario, shall we? I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are the 10 best alien abduction horror movies. Number 10. Communion. Based on the book of the same name, Communion follows a novelist called Whitley Strieber who's recently begun suffering visions involving bug-eyed aliens and surgical rooms. As his life falls apart, Whitley tries to make sense of what's happening to him before it's too late. Although alien abduction stories have been around for decades, Strieber's purported story is directly responsible for popularizing the Greys mythos, which has become a recognized staple in sci-fi. Communion feels more personal than the average horror flick, since these events are taken directly from Strieber's account of his purported visitation. Christopher Walken perfectly conveys the disturbed author's anger and frustration, but most importantly, his shame. Strieber is too embarrassed to acknowledge the abduction initially, knowing he'll be humiliated by his peers. Despite the outlandish premise, moments like this are emotionally resonant, as they accurately demonstrate how a victim of trauma would behave. Now, it goes without saying that the aliens themselves look hokey. Christopher Walken himself laughed the first time he saw them. However, Communion still proves to be a gripping and unsettling story, since the ensemble takes the subject matter deeply seriously. Number 9. Dark Skies. Scott Stewart's sci-fi horror centers around the Barrett family, who find themselves bombarded by unexplained phenomena. Hundreds of birds crash into their home without explanation. The house alarm activates, indicating every entry point in the house has been broken into at the same time. And when the mother appears outside her home with no recollection of how she got there, she starts to believe an outside force is responsible. What makes Dark Skies stand out is how it plays out like a haunted house story with a sci-fi twist. In fact, there's no indication the culprit behind these infractions came from space until later in the story. This vagueness works in the film's favor, since the Barretts have no idea what they're up against, further emphasizing their helplessness. Despite the hammy dialogue and thinly written characters, the actors have little trouble elevating the material with their performances, especially J.K. Simmons, who plays an exposition-dumping ufologist. Although jump scares have a bad reputation, Dark Skies gets away with them since they're innovative, uncliched, and above all, scary. Also, the intruders' methods of messing with the Barretts are so creative, you'll be left wondering what the aliens are going to pull out next. Number 8. Phoenix Forgotten. The Phoenix Lights is a phenomenon that's baffled the masses for decades, including the biggest UFO cynics. On March 13th, 1997, thousands of people saw a stream of mysterious lights bathe the night sky across Arizona and Nevada for 3 hours. Being the largest and most reported UFO in history, it was only a matter of time before the incident inspired a movie adaptation. Phoenix Forgotten opens with Sophie discovering footage of her brother who went missing during the Phoenix Lights sighting 20 years ago. Sophie starts analyzing the video, hoping to learn the truth about her brother's disappearance. Rather than being a straightforward found footage feature, Phoenix Forgotten keeps cutting between the unearthed tapes and Sophie's own investigation, which is a great way to amplify the tension. The initial tape ends as the brother discovers a charred corpse, so the audience is desperate for Sophie to uncover the rest of the footage to learn more. Even though the found footage angle has been done to death, few films in the genre seem more authentic than Phoenix Forgotten. The scratched frames and analog defects make the footage look like it originated from a VHS camcorder, making it easier to remain invested in the story. Number 7. Honeymoon. Lee Janiak's directorial debut revolves around two newlyweds, Paul and Bea, who head to a remote home for their honeymoon. After Paul finds his wife wandering through the woods, he worries something terrible has happened to her. As Bea's body begins to change, Paul becomes paranoid, questioning whether the love of his life has been replaced with some sort of doppelganger. The lead actors flawlessly portray the bride and groom as smitten lovers, which makes it more heartbreaking when they slowly turn on one another. It's tricky to know whose side to be on, since it's not evident for the longest time if Bea is who she claims to be. Is Paul out of line, or are his accusations spot on? The The unknown factor ensures every scene is slathered in nail-biting tension, especially during the spine-tingling scene where Paul ties Bee up to inspect her body, hoping to confirm her identity. By the time the body horror romance comes to an end, it's apparent the filmmaker's intentions were never to answer questions, but to leave viewers with enough nightmare fuel to last a lifetime. Number 6. Predators. After the disastrous reception of Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, there was no question the once unstoppable IPs had hit their lowest point. Suddenly, Predator 2 didn't seem so bad. Fortunately, Nimrod Antal's Predators successfully reinvigorated the tired brand. Rather than having the mandibled extraterrestrial terrorizing Earth yet again, the 2010 sequel centered around a group of humans who've been abducted and dropped onto the Predator's home world. Even if this wasn't a Predator installment, it's still a creative spin on the alien abduction trope, having the victims transported to another planet to be hunted for sport. Predators should also be commended for going against conventions with the main characters. Rather than following a noble band of heroes, the human ensemble is composed of mercenaries, hitmen, assassins, and serial killers. In any other movie, this lot would be the villains. However, this horrible bunch are the good guys by default, since they're the only human avatars we've got. However, their ulterior motives create a massive conflict, not just for the group, but for the audience, since we're unsure who to root for, especially when their alien abductors act more honorable than the deranged abductees. Number 5. Fried Barry. This South African horror opens with a drug addict named Barry enjoying a night on the town before being sucked into a flying saucer. Rather than giving Barry a standard probing before sending him on his merry way, the alien takes over his body. Disguised as Barry, he then heads to Cape Town, hoping to experience life as a human being. On the surface, Fried Barry is as bare bones as they come. There's no social commentary or emotional drama. Heck, there's barely a script. And yet the underrated black comedy is relentlessly entertaining. Every frame is etched in manic energy, either with skewed camera angles, extreme close-ups, or distorted music, which enhances the psychedelic aspect. Gary Green nails the titular role, convincingly portraying a balls-tripping alien. Due to Green's overexpressive face, he easily conveys a wide range of emotions without speaking. Fried Barry executes the humor so well. It's easy to forget that this is a horror, making the violence and gross-out moments even more shocking, especially that birth sequence. Cohesion mightn't be Fried Barry's strong suit, but the movie makes up for it by delivering a refreshing spin on the alien abduction concept. Number 4. Circle. In Circle, 50 people awaken inside an extraterrestrial prison, only to learn one of them will be executed every 2 minutes. When the strangers discover they can choose the next victim, they organize a vote, which leads to further chaos. Though labeled as a sci-fi horror, Circle plays out like a minimalistic drama, due to the singular location and dialogue-heavy scenes. The dynamic is reminiscent of 12 Angry Men, since the characters pick sides and bully their teammates to turn against the others. The tension never wavers, since the characters are dropping like flies from beginning to end. Even though the stakes are sky high, the situation could grow stale if the dynamic doesn't change. Fortunately, the remaining survivors keep trying different tactics to stave off death for another 2 minutes, which keeps the scenario permanently enthralling. Some of the unwilling participants rely on prejudice, ableism, and homophobia to sway the vote, while others rely on sneakier tactics that would fool almost anybody. Even though the aliens themselves remain off-screen, Circle should satisfy sci-fi purists, thanks to the sharp writing, nerve-tearing suspense, and thought-provoking concept. Number 3. The Signal. In The Signal, an MIT student called Nick is in pursuit of a mysterious hacker in Nevada when he's exposed to an alien life form. After Nick becomes terribly ill, a government agent called Damon does all he can to help him. What makes The Signal work is how it keeps itself grounded in reality for the most part, while still remaining suspenseful. A bombshell is dropped every 10 minutes, so there's never a dull moment. The film also delves into the potential biological dangers of extraterrestrials, emphasizing that physical contact could infect a person like a virus. With this notion in mind, the stakes are much higher when Nick is exposed to alien cells, especially when his body undergoes serious changes soon after. Similar to District 9, The Signal focuses on humanizing the conflict for the first hour, which makes the action-oriented climax more grand and satisfying. Some revelations are predictable, but still manage to subvert expectations. Although it's obvious Damon demon knows more than he's letting on, the truth behind him is unexpected. The signal is bound to leave anybody reeling for a while, since the twists keep coming right up until the credits roll. Number 2. No One Will Save You. No One Will Save You made an immediate impression when it debuted, since the film is completely devoid of dialogue. In the wrong hands, this decision could have come across as a needless gimmick. Fortunately, Caitlin Dever carries the movie as the heroic seamstress Bryn, effortlessly conveying the subtlest and most intense emotions without uttering a single word. Also, Bryn proves to be a solid lead. Despite the alien's telepathic powers and advanced tech, the badass dressmaker knows when to run, hide, or fight, allowing her to repeatedly come out on top. The Hulu original keeps everybody on their toes by routinely flipping genre. One moment it's a cat and mouse home invasion, the next it's a psychological drama, before descending into a full-scale sci-fi thriller. Every scene is riddled with anxiety-driven action, with Bryn constantly running for her life, battling extraterrestrials, and avoiding tractor beams. And after she encounters a mind-altering parasite, she is forced to fight the alien threat, not just physically, but mentally. At first, it seemed odd to turn No One Will Save You into a silent movie. However, the cosmic horror is brimming with so many creative ideas, dialogue would have just gotten in the way. Number 1. Fire in the Sky. Robert Lieberman's Fire in the Sky wasn't an initial success, considering it barely recouped its budget and received mixed reviews. And yet, the biographical fantasy has become a major component in sci-fi pop culture, purely because of one sequence. The film follows a logger called Travis Walton, who goes about his day like any other when he's suddenly kidnapped by aliens. Although he's returned days later, what his captors did to him isn't explored until the climax. And for many, this scene ruined their childhood. Awakening in a slimy cocoon surrounded by decomposing humans, Travis is dragged down a corridor by extraterrestrials. Slamming him onto an examination table, the aliens strap him down before ramming tubes and gel down his throat. The purpose behind this procedure isn't apparent, which intensifies Travis's disorientation and fear. The aliens behave coldly rather than maliciously, which makes them scarier since they experiment on Travis like he's a lab rat. This third act is all the more hard-hitting considering how slowly paced the movie has been up until this point. Despite the sci-fi premise, Fire in the Sky mostly plays out like a grounded drama, but in the last 20 minutes, it turns into a feverish night terror. Even though Fire in the Sky is technically a drama, it deserves to be recognized as a horror for this sequence alone.